So James, I'm going to kick off with you, and I can see you're in Indiana Jones mode. I see you on social media posting, kind of all of your adventures. So I want to kick off with you. Like, what is it that actually makes for a vibrant and healthy exploration drive in any country? What are kind of the supply side, if I can call it that, characteristics that exploration companies need to have to actually really go out there, get their hands dirty as you do, and make a success of exploration?
Thank you very much indeed, Sandra, and thank you very much indeed to Mining Weekly for hosting this very important webinar. And yes, I've just come back from my field site in Zebedela in the Limpopo province of South Africa to attend this webinar. And after this, I will go back again. So forgive me if I haven't brushed my hair or anything like that. So you've asked two questions there, Sandra, and I'll briefly deal with each of them. About, firstly, what makes a vibrant exploration drive in a country? I think there are two aspects to that. Firstly, prospectivity, i.e. the geology, and South Africa has that in spades. Some may say that it's a sunset industry, but in the light of new technology and new thinking, and Errol, our colleague who's going to talk about that later today, is a fantastic example of that. There remains many, many more mines to be found in South Africa. But allied to prospectivity, you need consistency, simplicity, and efficiency in terms of the application of the rule of law. And absolutely, from an exploration perspective, you need security of tenure. So if you discover something, you need to have the automatic right to actually mine it. Then into your second question, which is a little bit different, but a really, really important question about what are, from a supply side, what are the key ingredients from an explorationist perspective? Well, it's not a very well-known subject area, this, but if I could offer up a few ideas. Firstly, obviously, access to funding. That's really important, and I know we're going to be talking about that a bit later on today. But from an individual perspective, what makes a successful explorationist? And I think there are three main things, aside from technical competence, because I'm going to take that as a given. The first one is you must be intensely curious. Not just about your subject area, but you must read history. You must look at why deposits were found at certain times and what could be done. You must read annual reports. You must go back and look at the political context at that time. So curiosity is number one in my view. Number two is you must be a jack of all trades. So at the moment, I'm helping commissioning a plant. That's just what you have to do if you're a junior and you're an exploration. So you don't have HR departments, finance departments, IT departments. You are the sole department, and if you don't do the work, no one else does it. And very finally, and really importantly as well, is you have to have a risk appetite, because exploration is a high risk game. Not everything that you find is going to turn into a mine, far, far from it. And allied to that, successful explorationists tend to put their own money in as well at the same time. And often when you go and do fundraising, when you go and speak to a potential investor, one of the first questions they'll ask is, how much do you own of the company? I hope I've given you a bit of an overview there, Sandra.
James, you absolutely have. And I mean, James, I'd like to start out with you. What does investor appetite look like at the moment for funding exploration, participating in exploration? What do you see that investor appetite look like? Does it vary from country to country? And I suppose both from where the investors are, who have that appetite for the risk that you described so romantically in your opening remarks, and also in terms of the countries for which they have appetite. You're on mute at the moment, so yeah.
Sandra, thank you very much indeed for that question. There are three parts, I think, to your first question about investor appetite. Firstly, it depends on the commodity itself. And as we know, investors like to put money into whatever they believe is sexy or may make considerable money. And if I take you up on maybe on your introduction, where you see a general waning of exploration expenditure, well, if that's the case, then we are nowhere near going to become have green economies, because we simply don't have enough minerals to supply the green economy. So your first point is around commodity. The second one is around the capital markets. There are three main capital markets where you raise exploration funds in the world. It's the Canadian market, the British market, and the Australian market. Now, you can raise bits of money in other markets, but they are not significant. And it's a bit cyclical between those three markets at the moment. And I would hazard, having run public companies now for about 80 years, both out of the Canadian and British jurisdictions, that probably the Australian market is the better market at the moment to raise exploration capital. And then finally, because I think it comes on to your second part of your question, is around country risk. That's such an important point, and I made that at the very beginning. And there is something called the Fraser Institute study, which investors in these three economies look at. So when you go in, they look at their list of your commodities. Diamonds, no. Lithium, yes. Things like that. Then they ask which country you're from. And sadly, South Africa sits in the bottom 10% at the moment. We're 75th in the latest Fraser Institute study. But there are many beacons of hope in Africa. Ghana, Botswana too, for example. Even Guinea-Conakry is improving significantly. Zambia, I think, is going to be also a tour de force under their new leadership going forward. And if I summarize all of these, Sandra, my chairman, Dr. John Teeling, has got a lovely saying, and that is, a dollar is an orphan. It'll find its way home. So we've basically got to improve our ranking on the Fraser Institute study, because this is where investors look for money. We've got to have visibility in the three main markets. I'll let Errol deal with how we're going to contemplate raising money in South Africa, because I've tried very hard for 18 years and not done too well. But importantly too, you've got to take a long term look at which commodities you're in, because they are cyclical, and many other commodities will come to be at the top in the fullness of time.
Thanks so much, James. And I think that brings me nicely back to James, because the representation that we've got on the panel today, barring Mosa, who is customer agnostic, is largely junior mining, right? Companies that are exclusively focused on exploration. So if we have, all these large mining companies who are incredibly successful at producing, and who posted certainly record profits last year, even if this year is softening, James, why is there not more leverage into exploration expenditure? Why is it so tough still for the juniors to do these things? And why, quite frankly, do the majors not get more involved? If it's such a niche group, of individual investors out of a select group of markets who've got this risk appetite, where is the rest of the appetite coming from in terms of the major mining companies? And what could their role properly be in exploration and in helping to stimulate exploration? Unmute again, please, James.
Thank you, Sandra. Sorry. If one looks at the globally, majors contribute about 50% to global exploration, and juniors contribute about 50% to global exploration. And I think that's a really important statistic, particularly in the light of what you mentioned a moment ago, that much of our audience today are juniors. And then to pick up on what Errol mentioned a moment ago, in terms of greenfields, brownfields, and what I call mine site exploration, there is a declining amount of greenfields exploration in the world at the moment. And that's basically due to the risk appetite. So what can we do about actually improving this in South Africa? And I think there may be four things that we could do. The first thing, and Errol and Moss have spoken about that, and that is to simplify legislation. When an overseas investor looks at a particular country, they'll look at the rule book, and if the rule book is very long and complicated, they won't go there. They'll go to another country. I think the second thing, I was very blessed to go to the Royal School of Mines and do a degree in mining and exploration geology. And it was a mining school. So you shared common courses with mining engineers and metallurgists. So you are hopefully well-rounded when you actually graduated. My experience of young graduates now when they come into the market is they're good at what they do, whether it be metallurgy, mining, or geology, but they really haven't got much of a clue in terms of the other disciplines and how to relate to it. And I think that's a deficiency. And maybe somewhere like UJ, Wits, or Pretoria, I'm saying that because they're the three local universities, should look at something like a mining school as such. The third thing, and I think Errol has actually touched on that as well, is we must find a meaningful way of incentivizing exploration expenditure in South Africa. We do have abundant high net worth individuals in this country, and we do know in terms of portfolio theory that they should be investing part of their wealth in high risk, potentially high risk and high return assets. And sadly, the Section 12J of the Income Tax Act, which was designed around this, never actually contributed at the end of the day. But certainly one must look at something like a Canadian flow through share scheme or something such as that. And then very finally, and Moss has spoken about this as well, is that access to information is absolutely key. Botswana Diamonds is not only active in South Africa, but we're active in Zimbabwe and very much Botswana. And there you can access quarterly reports going back decades. So you can actually have a very good look at what's gone on in the past. And that provides you with a lens to see how you can explore in that country using new technology and new thinking.
James, thanks so much. Your views, James, on kind of relative prospectivity, relative advantages, if we set aside for the moment the regulatory environment, which I think we've exhausted, maybe just a few anecdotal observations from your side, being our resident journeyman on some of these countries.
Thank you, Sandra. I'd just like to pick up on Moss's kind of last point about negativity. My chairman, Dr. John Cheeling, came to a junior in Indaba about 5 years ago, and he was asked to sit on a panel. And he said, he kind of said, well, I'm going to say something which is going to upset you all. I have never been to a conference which is entitled about juniors, junior exploration, junior mining, which is so negative. The whole role of juniors, whether they be explorers or developers, is to seek opportunities where majors almost fear to tread and be positive about it. This is why Botswana Diamonds is equally active in South Africa as in Botswana, because we see it's got huge potential despite its challenges. So I just wanted to kind of get that off my chest, because I fully endorse that. We've got to roll up our sleeves, we've got to do the work, and we've got to be the best ambassadors of the country. People like Errol and I and many others out there, and then Moss, of course, in his perspective, we must be the big flag bearers. But if I look at Botswana in particular, because obviously we work there a great deal, and four things kind of strike me as being contrasting with South Africa. The first one, and we've spoken about it, so I won't dwell on it, is easily accessible information. I can access the information, geological information, cadastral information, all those kind of good things. Sadly, in South Africa, it's complicated, and I have to go through a consultant who I have to pay money to. And that kind of is something which is difficult for a junior, because that's probably my money, actually, at the end of the day. The second thing is you want a really simple process. You want something which is not reams and reams of paper, something that you can easily do and easily be compliant with. Thirdly, and I think this was raised by Errol possibly earlier, are almost guaranteed timelines. So if you're going to apply for a prospecting license, you want to have, with a fairly good degree of certainty, you're either going to get a yes or a no within a certain period of time. In Botswana, that's within 3 months, they say yes or no. And if it's no, they give you good reason. If it's yes, off you go. In South Africa, no, sometimes that takes a little bit longer. And I think the fourth thing, and I think this is probably not just a function of Botswana itself, but probably a function of its smaller size compared to South Africa, is both the President and the Minister of Mines are very accessible in terms of anything that stimulates economic activity in Botswana. If I just kind of share something, at the Mining Indaba last year, I got to meet the President of Botswana, His Excellency President Masisi, and he asked me, is there anything more we can do to help you acquire the Gagu diamond mine in Botswana? And I said to him cheekily, well, your ministry has done everything, but if the government wants to write me the check, then we can start mining. But there it was. He was trying to facilitate what he could in terms of stimulating economic activity in that country by people who've got a long history in terms of successful exploration and successful mine delivery.
Fantastic, thanks. And James, I just want to check between you and Errol whether you've got any views on our other neighbours, Namibia, Angola, a few of those countries.
If I could just maybe briefly comment on Zimbabwe, and then Errol can kind of kick off from there. Zimbabwe is gradually opening for business. You know, if platinum and diamonds up until a few years ago were strategic minerals, and many of the other minerals weren't. So those minerals, you know, it actively encourage exploration. Platinum fell off that list, so there's an active business there. Diamond sadly has not. So I think there is some way to go there, and it is very, very difficult to work in diamonds in Zimbabwe. But I'm an eternal optimist. Explorers have to be optimistic that before I hang up my kind of walking shoes and my geological hammer, Zimbabwe will open for business, and it will be ripe for exploration, because like South Africa, it's highly prospective.
Thanks, James. Errol.
Thank you so much for your time, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.